Okay, good morning, everybody. We're off to a little bit of a late start, but it is Saturday, and thank you for spending your time today. And I am so delighted to introduce our first speaker for the day. This is Fireproof woman, Erien Fryer. And Erien has an amazing background. I hope she's going to share some of the highlights of her personal story. Very well, thank you.
Very good. Very good.
Oh,
Extraordinary.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm about to get started. And Heather, you had a question. What are the topics? Well, my topic is fireproof. The 3 E's of becoming a fireproof leader after abuse. Okay? Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever started watching a movie in the middle and find it hard to enjoy because you have so many questions that you couldn't really enjoy the movie? Put yes in the chat if that relates to you. Well, my life was kind of like that. I started running. I was running. But in all honesty, life started and I was dropped in the middle. See, I was the third of 3 kids, and I was the youngest. I was, at that time, 2. I have a 5-year-old brother at that time, and I have a 7-year-old sister. And we got the sudden news when my dad was in his early 30s, about 30, 31, that he needed to have open heart surgery. He was in the military at the time, and so that meant he needed to go to North Carolina to have the surgery. And we were in Georgia, and we had relatives in Alabama, so we had to go that summer and be with relatives in Alabama. And from that visit, my life was changed forever. And I started running, and I didn't know why. I was running for my life, actually. And I had companions. I had Jesus, of course, and I had, even at that young age, but I had shame and fear and confusion and inadequacy. And I felt really just unintelligent and an unexplainable loneliness. And I felt invisible. And during that phase in my life, that what started at 2 went into 11. So it was 9 years of my life. I was in a situation that I didn't even have words for. I learned much, much later it was a sexually abusive situation, and I did not know. So I just felt that I'll follow the norms. I was told, what stays in the home, what happens in the home stays in the home, and all those kind of things. And I remained speechless and silent, and I just silently struggled and just told myself, well, whatever this is, I'm not going to let it affect me. So then I continued to run. I was not running for my life at that point. I was running from my life, because when in a situation like that, especially as a child, it's not uncommon to take it all personally. Say, well, I must have done something wrong. I must be wrong. Something is amiss, and I didn't know what to do, how to say it, or what. I just was at a loss. So I began to run from my life. And I'd say, well, I just told myself I'm not going to let any of this affect me, so I'm just going to be an achiever. But the achievement was on the outside, the music, the good grades, the spiritual, achievements. And the environment was, at that time, basically, as long as things look good on the outside, you don't worry about the inside. So I was suffering in silence. And unfortunately, and fortunately, it always depends on how you want to look at it. I began to understand that although you can make things look good on the outside, you still have to contend with the inside. In reality, really struck. Actually, it wasn't until I was 31 years old, in all honesty. And well, a little bit before that, I had run a race where I had come to the end of myself. What do I mean? Well, you can only run from yourself for so long until you realize you will never be able to outrun your life. And there will be things you will need to address at some point. And so I was at a crossroads. Was contemplating one of two things. One thing was I continue to run, but I could no longer go on that way. So that was no longer an option. So I could either take my life and let the adversary write my history and my epitaph, which would sound something like this. Here lies Erien, another saint that has died without fulfilling their purpose. And the devil rejoices. So I'm like, oh, but no, I knew too much. Although I was young, I grew up in the church and I knew about Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit. And I was drawn to him at a very early age because I needed him. I needed to know there was something greater than me. And then I had the other option. I could take the pen from the hand of the adversary, write my own life, write my own story, and write my own epitaph. That would go more like this. Here lies Erien, a victorious saint who has helped upbuild the kingdom by leading many to know that they are free, fruitful, and fearless in me. And she builds up the kingdom. So I chose the latter. But in order to make that happen, I had to stay and submit myself to, if you will, the potter's wheel. And I began to redefine me running from my life to running to my life. And then the perspective changed where the Lord kind of zoomed out and I was able to see I'm not just running an endless race. I'm on the potter's wheel. And then I realized that in the clay, he had worked within me the gems from those early years to make the vessel priceless. And he was constantly molding and making me. Yesterday, we had a question from Tracy. Tracy said, "But how do you get to that place?" This is how. I fully submitted myself to the potter's wheel. And each turn, he worked out and worked in me that thing that I needed to be a vessel of honor. And I continue to stay on the master's wheel. And from that, I learned three things. First of all, I learned to embrace the need for divine assistance. Wherever you are, whatever you've gone through, whatever you have experienced, realize that life is greater than you. The world is greater than you. There are many things that are greater, and only we can control ourselves. But as I would say, oftentimes life is too hot to handle and you just need a pot holder and one who has a greater perspective, and that's God. God, yes, that's my higher being is God and his word and his indwelling Holy Spirit, because that helps make me fireproof in knowing I don't have to say, but I know who has the final say, and I am working and living as his ambassador, carrying a message and pouring as a vessel of honor, living water over those priceless gems of my life and from my life, which are things like compassion, love, patience, and being able to listen to others. In the chat, say that makes sense. If it makes sense, just say yes. Are you still with me? All right. So first of all, embrace divine help. Secondly, the second thing is evolve to wholeness. And what do I mean? I refer to living life from outside in, making it look good on the outside. And we often see this in leadership when leaders look like, man, they have it going on there until they don't. And when they don't, it sometimes results in a large scandal, a very disgraceful fall, a situation where other people are greatly wounded. So I say it is important as fireproof leaders to submit ourselves to the will to the point that we can integrate the past, the present, and move in integrity, in wholeness to the future, spirit, mind, and body. Because oftentimes it's easy to look good on the outside and be a wreck on the inside. And that is a setup for failure. The adversary loves it because you can only get to a certain point until that external is worn off and the real you comes through. And if you are not comfortable with that real you, you will either self-destruct or be destroyed by a greater system, because you have come to the end of yourself without being totally integrated. People will say, oh, but the past is the past. Dear heart, until you remember, you cannot reassemble, okay? So if you don't remember, the goal is not to stay there. It is to gain what you need to gain, reassemble, and the potter puts together and remembers things and better than mint condition. So you will come out better than you came in, and you will have the riches of that experience. So finally, the third E, after you have embraced your divine need for help, you have evolved into wholeness. Thirdly, I would say empower courageous growth in self and others. A real fireproof leader is so comfortable with who they are, what they have, and why they are here. They are eager to permit space for people to grow and to explore and give them a safe place to break. Yeah, a safe place to break, because you understand as a leader the need to take care of the inside, to live from the inside out and not the outside in. And sometimes it takes removing an external veneer, like placing a coat of wax on a floor with a buffer. You have to strip off that old coat first before you can then get the true shine of the floor. And when you get a really good shine on the floor, you can see yourself. And so we have to be comfortable enough with ourselves. We can see ourselves, permit other people to see themselves, and permit other people to grow in our presence, meeting them where they are. So you might say, well, why all of this? Well, we are in a need of leadership, and fireproof leadership is not a destination, it is a process. Because I will remain on the wheel for however long it takes for me to fulfill the purpose that God has for me as a vessel of honor. Yeah,